In his book, It Was on Fire When I Lay Down on It, Robert Fulghum tells the story from which he takes the title of the book. In the story, the fire department is called to a house with smoke pouring out of an upstairs window. They immediately break open the door and rush up the stairs. Inside a smoke-filled bedroom, they find a man lying down on a smoldering mattress. They rescue the man and douse the mattress with water, and when everything is under control, they ask him, "What happened? How did the mattress catch on fire?" And the man simply shrugged and he said, "I don't know. It was on fire when I lay down on it." I've always remembered that line. It's an older book from the 90s, but I could never remember the point of the story, so I had to look it up. And I was surprised by Fulghum's very sympathetic interpretation of the story. He quotes the philosopher Horace, who is speaking in Latin, who said, "Quid rides mutato nomine de te fabula natur," which means, "Why do you laugh? Change the name and the story is told of you." In fact, Fulghum's book is a collection of stories about foolish, clownish things that we all do as imperfect human beings, the way we go through life bumbling and tripping, and we rarely learn from our mistakes. Fulghum tells another story. Sitting down for lunch one day, one of his colleagues was complaining about the way he always had the same boring food in his lunch bag day after day, year after year. So Fulghum asked, "Well, who packs your lunch?" And his colleague replied, "I do." It was on fire when I lay down on it. In our Bible story today, as we've heard so well, two disciples of Jesus are walking along the road. It's the same day that the women had gone to the tomb to care for the body, so it's Easter Day. They'd found the tomb empty. And these two disciples are troubled by the women's report of the empty tomb, and they're talking it over together. And suddenly Jesus is alongside them, but they fail to recognize him. They just see this stranger walking by their side. They strike up a conversation anyway, and the disciples tell this Jesus, who they don't recognize, about all the events that over the several years that have led up to that day, and then all the events of that very morning. And they explain how much they're struggling with it because they expected Jesus to bring in a new age in which the nation of Israel would throw off Roman oppression and return to the glory of a politically powerful and militarily secure nation. And so that the crucifixion of Jesus, his death, his burial, and now disappearance of the body have them feeling lost and confused. Then Jesus, still unrevealed to them, still appearing to them as a stranger, begins to explain that all these things they're yearning for, redemption, salvation, healing, restoration, security, that all these things come not through military might and power or the exertion of our wills or getting what we want all the time, but through self-sacrifice and vulnerability. In fact, the only way, he says, for a better world to be born is if we die to our limited, fear-based, selfish practices and understandings. Well, finally, as these three arrive at their destination, they sit down for a meal, and Jesus breaks the bread, and famously, their eyes are open, and they see him for who he is. They realize it was Jesus all the time, and he disappears immediately. They turn to each other and say, "Were not our hearts burning while he was walking with us on the road?" Now, we might read this story and wonder, how did you not know? How did you walk all that way and come to the end of the journey and only then realize that your hearts were on fire with the presence of Christ? And perhaps they would reply, "We don't know, but our hearts were definitely on fire the whole time." By the way, these disciples, when they say their hearts are burning within them, in that time and culture, the heart was the place of our thinking. It's the place where we thought things out and made decisions. They didn't know that the brain is where a lot of that happens, at least in our modern understanding. And so today, if they were saying that same thing today, they might say, "Weren't our heads on fire the whole time with the presence of Christ? How did you come to the end of this journey with your heads on fire? Well, we don't know, but they were on fire the whole time. Now, we all know intellectually that every person is precious. We know that every person we meet is carrying burdens we can't see. We know that through our faith that every person is a child of God and that Christ is within every person. We know that whatever we do to the least of these, we do to Christ, that however we respond to any suffering being is the way we are responding to Christ. We know there are angels among us. In other words, our heads are on fire with this knowledge all the time. Every time we engage with another human being, another person, our heads are on fire with the knowledge of the divinity of that person, the holiness of that interaction. Whether we're talking to a grocery store clerk or to our children at bedtime, our heads are on fire with the knowledge of God's presence. Whether we're talking to a grandparent or to customer service at the cable company, our heads are on fire. I know our heads feel like they're on fire when we're talking to the cable company, but they're actually literally on fire with the knowledge that this person on the other end of the line, as frustrated as they may be or we may be, that person is the presence of Christ in our lives at that moment. Fulghum wonders about that man who lay down on the burning mattress. He wonders, why did he do it? Was he drunk? Was he ill, suicidal, cold? Just dumb? Did he just have a weird sense of humor? And he says we can't really know why he did it without more information, though we may often jump to some conclusions about why someone would do that, why someone would lay down on a burning mattress. We don't know. But remember, he says, why do you laugh? Change the name and the story is told of you. Why do we fail to miss the holiness of so many interactions in our daily lives? Why do we walk right by Christ 100 times a day without recognizing him? How can we not recognize that our heads are on fire with this knowledge every time we meet someone? The Emmaus Road story offers a simple challenge, but not an easy one. Can we recognize Christ in our midst more often? Can we recognize Christ in every being? Can we recognize that our heads are on fire with that knowledge? And most importantly, can we recognize it before the moment has passed? We will just walk around with our heads on fire until someone asks us, why are you walking around with your head on fire? Is that how it's going to be? That we're just going to walk around that way until those brief moments when someone points it out? Are we just going to keep doing that until bewildered and alone we say, I don't know how I missed it, but I know it was on fire the whole time? Amen.